Because sometimes we make this mistake of saying, where are young people? And then any Tom, Dick, and Harry is just taken and placed in a strategic position and they fail. And they fail now what would have been a revolutionary project to uplift young people to be the drivers for change, right? Yes, the ANC must deploy people in the department, in any department that they have power over, they should do so. Universities want to depoliticize institutions because, they just don't want that kind of power, which was proven by students 2015, 2016. But what is SASCO willing to do? We're starting with, building our structures. Because another kind of admission I have to make, whilst that was happening.
Oh my gosh! This is incredible! Oh yeah! I love also the packaging. Yay! Almost. There's an egg cheese about to go in. That is so good! You've got chips in there? Oh my god, this is so good. Oh, and a hash brown. This is really so good.
People today, the breakfast video. You're not here, so
It's mine, thank you. Yes.
the masses are being fed, but you'll, I don't know, have fun in Cape Town, I guess.
I appreciate that, and it's good, guys. It's selective food. I think that bites a chili.
But I need to finish the
Big tip.
That's a burrito. A fiesta in your mouth. Thank you so much. This is good.
Mosai's Kitchen on the Hustler's Corner. Welcome. You can order your our menus on Uber Eats. Go check out our menu. Let us know what you like. Do you like our Makoparosh platter for 6, platter for 8, platter for 10? Do you like our quarters? Do you like our other meals? Meal for 1, meal for 2, meals for 3. I don't know what meals do you like, but soon as you order Mosai's Kitchen, when you get your order, take images, also take videos, and post it on your social media platforms under the hashtag Mosai's Kitchen. We'd like to thank you guys for supporting us. We've been in business now for almost 2 months in Sandton and surrounding areas, 5-kilometer radius. We are launching Mosai's Kitchen Rosebank at the end of June. So I just wanted to say, Rosebank, we are coming your way soon. We'll be growing all over Joburg, all over Gauteng, and very, very soon to the rest of the country. Now, it was just my birthday 2-3 weeks ago. I officially turned 46. I'm no longer youth, so I cannot necessarily properly speak on youth matters. So it's always nice to have young people to have a conversation of their own because they understand their matters better. Here to conduct the conversation and hold the interview will be Rori Moseli. His social media platforms are Rori Moseli. He was, his ex-SRC president, UCT, Fees Must Fall activist, and graduate from the UCT. And we are hanging out with president of SASCO, Mr. ALUNGILE KAMTSHE. And we are quite excited to hear more about youth matters and youth issues. I mean, I'm just going to be a spectator and an audience of what's going on amongst young people in South Africa. And thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate you guys joining us.
Thank you very much, Tasmo.
Thank you, sir. Let me do this so that Sizoguzwa grand, sure.
Sharp,
It's nice to meet you, President.
Sharp, Razo, yeah.
Appreciate your leadership.
Oh, good.
Thank you, ex-president.
not a president. We were led by different presidents of different formations. So not at this level, but yeah.
So I'm 46 years old. I've never been called president of anything, but here are 2 young people who are ex-president and a current president. Let them have the conversation. I'll excuse myself and I'll be a spectator and an audience and watch this interesting conversation around issues that matter to our younger brothers and sisters, issues that matter to our children, girl children and boy children as well. Welcome to the Hustler's Corner at Mosai's Kitchen.
Thank you very much, Smuda.
President, as Boo said, we're having a conversation about youth issues, young issues, and students' issues around campus. But of course, not everybody knows what SASCO is at home. So maybe let's start there. You're the president of SASCO. What are you the president of?
This is an organization. Right from its beginning, it was an organization known to stand for the poor, for the marginalized, for those who cannot access university. Today, it is a university for transformation. Nothing much has changed. By transformation, simply we mean that no deserving student must not be able to access institutions of higher learning. No deserving student must not be able to continue with their studies because of funding. No deserving student must stay in an unconducive environment. No student must be taught something that is not going to make them, to be economically active and a responsible citizen. No deserving student, when they're on campus, must not get the necessary assistance to achieve, better grades and all of that. No deserving student must not be supported post their graduation to get training and employment. So, in summary, that is what SASCO is all about, It's a home for everyone who feels like, for one reason or another, they are unable to access and get all of these demands, We have our own approach to things, which is largely political, because we know very well that political activism is our only instrument, to voice out our concerns. But also through political activism, we don't just, want to voice out of our concerns without replacing new systems that will be inclusive and that will bring about development in our society, not just the institutions. I think in simplicity, that's what SASCO is about, my brother.
I mean, that's, a really great. I mean, I think you spoke about a range of issues, such, the quality or the access to housing. You spoke about, fees, accessibility to fees, post education and post graduation attainment and access to the employment market. So we have a sense of some of the issues that SASCO wants to hide or at least speaks about. But maybe you can, first just zone in on what are your key priorities at the moment as SASCO, as a South African Students' Congress. What are the key issues that and campaigns that you are currently working on, so we have a better sense of the organization?
Yeah, right from the beginning of the year, Rori, we have a flagship campaign we would call a Right to Learn campaign. We are establishing a right for every South African to access institutions. So what we do there, we fight for students not to be excluded. It's first students who are first time on campus that owing to whatever barriers, they must be able to access. The second one would be students who were there, who are returning, who would either been excluded, either financially, academically, or some other socio-economic factors which would have resulted them to be excluded. So we would fight for them so that they enter institutions. At the beginning of the year, you would have noticed there was a much more cry about the number of graduates. The number of matriculants versus the number of spaces that are available in institutions of higher learning. We've observed that there's limited space, and that number keeps increasing, the number of people now who have to form part of the congestion in townships, in our villages, because they cannot access institutions. So every year, the number is increasing. So our battle there is to ensure that we, reinvigorate the call to universities that you do have money, by the way, money in reserves to build more infrastructure, to expand, so that there can be more students that come in. We also wake up the government of today that you play a role. You need to play a role because education is a cornerstone, a hallmark for any nation's development. So it's necessary for you to make it a point that you build new institutions. That is one of them. And the second one is on accommodation. Coupled with the fact that there's challenges with accessing, there's also a non-expansion on the front of accommodation, availability of accommodation for contact students, you know. So we are pushing a rigorous campaign as it relates to that as well, institutions of higher learning, due to the monies that they have, I must say to you, Rori, they're not willing to declare that money, you know. They're not willing to declare that money, only because we suspect if you are unable to declare certain amount of funds, there must be some malfeasance, you know, with universities. They've money from investments, but they're called reserves. So they should be using that money to build more facilities, you know, invest in higher education. The last one, we're saying that institutions must scrap off historical debt because it is a barrier for young people to get employment. They've got some double jeopardy there. You know, they are either chased by debt trackers on the other hand. There's that heavy burden, and then they are unable to get employment. Universities must, you know, scratch that debt. They must scrap it off, or use the reserves once again to pay off that amount of money. We're told it's sitting somewhere close to 18 billion. And the reason why we feel firm about this is because we know very well that there isn't any institution that is failing because that money isn't paid. So it's part of the social service, you know, by institutions of higher learning to ensure that everyone gets access to employment by giving them their certificates. That is one of our characteristics. There's quite a lot, Rori. There's quite a lot.
Yeah, but you interestingly, you speak about, and you mention things like the issue of reserves in order to generate revenue. You mention things like scrapping of historical debt. But unlike other political formations, as I'm sure you were able to appreciate, SASCO is aligned with the ANC. So I think that, generally speaking, for a very long time, the question then becomes, you're aligned with the ANC, your office, last time I checked, is at Luthuli House. How does SASCO utilize and leverage the relationship with the ANC to get some of these things done?
Interesting that you brought that up. You know, if I was one of leaders of the yesteryear, they would find it difficult, you know, or feel like they're put in the spot if they have to, you know, confirm their relationship with them. We are in alliance with the ANC. And that alliance is born out of the fact that there's a historical mission we need to fulfill. That at times we do feel that the ANC is failing it. We do feel that at times. They do give us a platform to explain, you know. We do push for that platform, by the way, that explain to us why on A, B, and C you are failing on this particular subject. No? They will tell us all of those things. Some we reject, some we accept. Our relationship is marked by this thing. We compliment whatever good that they do, you know. We criticize whatever bad, you know, that they do. You know, we are not some tomfoolery that just follows whatever they, you know, we just roll with whatever they do. We don't. Now, just back to your question. We agitate, Rori. What we do, we mobilize students outside seeking consent from the ANC. We go to students and say, we educate them that here is an injustice. Let's get together. Let's be on the picket lines. It's only then that when they come, either a minister or so, we treat them as a minister. There's nothing different. When they come, we say, here's an injustice on a black child, on a deserving child, someone who is expected by their family to change conditions in their family and in their community. Here is an injustice. Fix this thing. So we are the ones who have you know, shaped the higher education sector through this, you know, interchangeable conversations, through fighting, being on the ground, ensuring that we mobilize students, pickets, protests. We've been there. We've made our message clear on the question of free education and what it means, the quality of education that we need, the quality and the nature of infrastructure that is required. Ne? So we challenge the ANC through media, through what you would call in the corporate terms, boardroom discussions, through congresses. They invite us to their congresses so that we can agitate for a change, you know? So that relationship to someone who's at a distance might think we kind of roll for everything that the ANC says. No, it's not the situation. And by the way, out of that, the ANC gets to appreciate because it grows and it takes a particular direction. We've won many battles, you know? If you look at it from TEFSA to NSFAS, the expansion of access to higher education, SASCO there. The conversation about the mergers, SASCO there. The enlightenment about free education, which at its apex stage, we saw fees must fall. That is SASCO there, you know? So the ANC sometimes hits, sometimes does not, but in most instances, we do influence even their policy posture on education. They got to adopt in 2017 that they are going to announce free education on the basis that SASCO was at the heart of pushing for that policy change. So that is how we do it.
You for me, it's a real question about relevance. Because I hear and I understand you in terms of the history of victories and your agitation and the protests and how you mobilize students and effectively display numbers. But if we look at the performance of SASCO on campuses during SRC elections, its capacity to mobilize, whether it's between now and 10 years ago, now and 15 years ago, some may say that SASCO's influence has declined from other forces and other political formations, and perhaps SASCO's inability or limited ability to influence the ANC. So my thinking, or at least what I'd like to know from you as now the president of SASCO in 2025, what is SASCO doing to credibly show its students, show the public that indeed SASCO not just is relevant, but can deliver the material outcomes that they advocate for?
Yeah, look, it's rather a double-edged sword responding on this one. Why? Because I'm compelled to admit on our internal limitations that have been there, that have hindered growth for SASCO, because ability to influence, speaks much more about growth. In effect, on the one hand, I'm compelled as well, to actually admit certain shortfalls, because if we don't publicly admit that there are those shortfalls, it means we will be creating barriers for people not to join SASCO or to be part of SASCO because maybe SASCO is not so honest about itself now. Look, Rori, you can never detach SASCO's decline, let's say performance, let's say influence, from the general decline of activism altogether, There's decline in activism. And I have to touch on that before I answer what are we doing, because we're not just interested in bringing back SASCO's influence. We want to bring back the influence of students. Now, Fees Must Fall gave an awakening to university managers, to government, about the power of students. We held this country at standstill. 2015, 2016, held this country at standstill. They learned about the power of students. And then they had this headache, especially this entity called USAF. It's a union of vice chancellors of universities, more especially universities. So they had this thing of, how do we possibly curb the power of students? Because it may seem that students have the power to halt the academic project of the institution, closing classes and everything so that there are demands, and they are not, they're unflinching. How do we do that? They got, do we call it a godsend if it worked against us? which was COVID-19. I'm not sure if we'll call it a godsend on their part, but they got that opportunity. What COVID-19 did was to, restrict everyone in the country from mobilizing, from movement, and all of that. That year saw rigorous, serious changes of policies in universities and regulations by management, because they knew that there aren't students on campus who are going to mobilize against that and that and that. Some of them, no mass meetings must take place on campus. Some of them, political students formations must not conduct certain programs on campus. They must go through, a tiring process, to do just a simple political program. They must not mobilize students during SRC elections. Hell, even when you go to SRC elections, you must not wear a t-shirt showing an emblem of your own organization. There are no people, a president of SASCO from national cannot enter University of Free State during campaigns, you see? And then, you know what they did then? They brought what is called online elections. Yeah, we've issues about that because it doesn't truly test, the kind of a democratic practice on the ground for how do we mobilize students. Can you really tell that because you've won elections, you really, really, really have that amount of influence over students? It lacks checks and balances. We have issues about it because if you are unable to mobilize students up behind a particular agenda, mandate, memorandum, and whatsoever, and they can just only vote online, what can you test your influence against on? So I'm saying you cannot remove that from just the decline of activism altogether. Universities want to depoliticize institutions because, they just don't want that kind of power, which was proven by students 2015, 2016. But what is SASCO willing to do? We're starting with, building our structures. Because another kind of admission I have to make, whilst that was happening, there was some internal ruckus, some infighting, in organizations. Factionalism. You've seen it. All organizations, yeah? You've seen it in DA, where Muslim Amana left with Athol Trollip, in EFF, we've just seen it. You've seen it in the ANC. You've seen it everywhere. It exists. So we've dealt with that. So far, the beginning of this year, we've seen much more unity rather than division. No? And this unity does not, represent unity of SASCO, it's a unity of students, right? And then we said, by the way, why do we have so many political formations on campus when right at the beginning there was just SASCO? What has changed? No? Oh, we realized much of our language is similar, but much of our strategies may differ. No? We then sat down as a National Executive Committee. What are the current student struggles, which I tabled at the beginning, that are there, that we need to call for actually unity for all of these students' formations so that we can bring about systemic change, because these divisions we have, they kind of take our eyesight from the real problem. But there are changes that have been, put in by the management, and then those changes are limiting the power of students to voice out themselves. We developed what was called the Students' Charter. We are going to roll it out through the country through proper campaigns where we speak about what is it that unites us rather than what divides us as students. So it's SASCO that is going to be taken. So we've developed that campaign, which is tailored on student struggles. Well, Students' Charter is not speaking on anything that is different from what actually impacts students at that time and every day on campus. So,
Can you tell us a little bit more about what is in the Students' Charter? Let's not wait until the campaign. You want to?
Simple. I told you at the beginning. The Students' Charter is about access. We're fighting for access. We demand access to institutions of higher learning. How does that happen? Expand on the availability of infrastructure, right? provide platforms that can, increase the level of access, even if it's online. We've also made proposals about possibilities in certain institutions about, night classes, where it's safer, of course. The second one, we speak about being funded, the concept of free education. Yeah, we get a little bit more elaborate there, because there's always a question, where is this money going to come from for free education? If you are not from SASCO, you might struggle to answer that question. But if you're from SASCO through the Students' Charter, you'll be able to answer that question. But there must be that funding for free education. We speak about conducive environment, which is a third one. It's a third demand. We speak about conducive environment, that is, what's the kind of accommodation you are in? What's the kind of access you have to labs, to lecture halls, accessing libraries, the material? Are you empowered to have that kind of study material and all of that? Are you in a secured environment? That is the security aspect. What about a clean environment? What about, an environment where you can get medical attention? Campuses must have clinics. We always speak about that. Counseling units, to curb this issue of mental health. The conducive environment is more about that, you see. So the Students' Charter, as it relates to that, we go a little bit into detail, especially on the issue of infrastructure, on the question of conducive environment. And the fourth one is about curriculum. That I said earlier on, Rori, you would not have to be taught something that would not make you to be a responsible citizen and equal and economically active citizen. You see?
And these are really, because you've mentioned a lot, but I really want to stick on the question of massification. Or we used to call it massification.
Massification, yes.
Which really means about expanding the seats in higher education or in schools, and ensuring sufficient funding around it. As you mentioned, many of student activism, you can't really think about it really historically, generally without SASCO being a main character and a main player. And when we talk about free education, you mentioned fees must fall. And basically, one of the victories of that was the transformation of NSFAS, which used to be a loan, into a grant. Firstly, I think, can you please just help us understand, as of 2025, what is the state of NSFAS and the delivery of funding to students? What does it include? And how does SASCO reflect on the effectiveness of NSFAS in order to respond to some of the issues that you're raising?
Yeah. Look, today an NSFAS student can be granted with tuition funds, with accommodation, in some institutions, traveling allowance. There is also, it's just that I've forgotten the word, but assistance with the toiletries and stuff. No? The student will get book allowances, also, the increase on the cap. So there's much improvement indeed since the days of fees must fall and the expansion that is there. But as you are raising it correctly, there are problems with delivery. And as far as is faced with serious issues you've seen in the news, at the heart of it is just maladministration. There's maladministration at NSFAS, if a student, if just basic one, is inquiring on something directly, from NSFAS, it might take a week before they are responded to. That's the challenge they have. And if a student is not responded to, they would mistake. It's a mistake that sometimes they make, to think that if I go to SASCO and inquire about this, SASCO is the one which would provide that response which would be coming from NSFAS. Rather, our role is to make it a point that NSFAS is accessible to students, not that NSFAS, SASCO is somewhere synonymous. to NSFAS. But we cannot blame students, way of looking at things, because they are just students at the end of the day. We don't even complain. We just, whack so NSFAS has challenges. Maladministration, we've heard about corruption. It's been corruption at NSFAS, NSFAS tried to, as part of the Victories of Fees Must Fall, to change systems. You heard about the direct payments project where NSFAS contracted certain companies, allowance disbursement companies, to provide allowances to students. And then those companies started doing funny things like hiking charges or fees and all of that, disbursing allowances not on time to students and all of that. There are politics also related to that. But as well, the issue of student accommodation accreditation by NSFAS. One of the key interventions by NSFAS, but which were spoiled by corruption. That's the problem, right? If I were to just highlight a little bit on this one of student accommodation accreditation. What we've seen through that project, by the way, the pilot, is expansion in availability of student accommodation, not only in universities, in TVET colleges. TVET colleges, some of them are in rural areas, in townships where you would not see a physical structure for accommodation for students. But through NSFAS intervention, they were able to say, you know what? If you've got a property, which you can turn it into a student accommodation, NSFAS would send its people to come and accredit and look at it. But is this conducive enough for a student to stay in and pursue their academic activities? It expanded that, but it had its own shortfalls as well. Like any system, they would always have shortfalls. And also, it eliminated this thing to a certain extent. This thing by universities accrediting poor accommodation, literally poor accommodation. And also universities, if you look at most of the private-owned accommodation versus university-owned accommodation, you'd see the difference. University-owned accommodation is in a dilapidated state, which is what has resulted in a student being shot. Those students who had shot at Walter Sisulu University, who were protesting on the conditions of student accommodation. I've been there at Walter Sisulu because I led in the Eastern Cape as well as a provincial chair of SASCO. That institution has, they've not taken interest to change the accommodation there at UNITRA campus, that Nelson Mandela Drive campus, which was formerly known as UNITRA. They are not. It's bad. So there are good things that NSFAS would do. They are just spoiled in the process. This one of direct payments, it was spoiled to a point that we just said, no, just stop it. Stop it, hold it, because there's a lot. Part in the main of what went wrong there. Universities didn't want the money to be dispersed by those companies. They wanted to be dispersed by themselves, right? Because when they get that chunk of money from NSFAS, they actually invest it, and get, more interest in it. So when that was taken away, they got angry. They started withholding registration templates, that if you're a student, Rori, remember NSFAS, when you apply to it directly right now, you no longer go through the queues, those long queues at varsity. You no longer go through that. You apply directly to NSFAS. NSFAS is going to say, given the fact that you've proven your status, your socio-economic status, of which we don't like that for you to be, exposed to showing how poor you are. But now that it is the case, we've proven that you qualify for NSFAS, right? We do provisionally fund you. Provisional fund means we will take you, depending on whether you can prove whether you are actually admitted to this institution or not. And then universities, they withhold that because proof is you registering, that I'm registered here. They withhold that and they submit it somewhere around May when students are already frustrated about allowances. And naturally, NSFAS can't take out money to someone who is not known to be a student anyway. But we then called for some interventions because we knew these students. We said, but take out this money irrespective. They did it. It also led into another problem. all right, led to other problems. But I'm saying above and all is that NSFAS needs an integrated system. Universities need to play a role in ensuring that they work with NSFAS, they work with the Department of Higher Education, they provide the needed registration. They do not frustrate it because their main concern is to generate money because they treat universities as businesses. They need to make it a point that they provide these registration templates, they collaborate with NSFAS for the well-being of students. There's institutions, they still behave like we're still in the apartheid era, you know? They're still preserving that colonial image, colonial culture, the colonial interest of accumulation. That is, we're going to take and take and take and never give. You know, there's that problem with that. So NSFAS, as much as it is its internal maladministration issues and also institutions are at the heart of ensuring that students are not getting the better service that they're supposed to be getting. That's a real problem.
You speak about, I think it's very important that you mention the issue of maladministration, of corruption, that it touches and it clearly includes higher education at multiple levels. You'll correct me if I'm wrong, but as you say, it's been a long time since I've been in university. But from what I know and understand, SASCO in amandla.
Yes.
And part
that's
of
quite
that
true.
and part of that power has been SASCO's ability and capacity to influence who's hired on the board of NSFAS. In fact, in many instances, if I remember correctly, I think there's a student representative, or SASCO has a history, maybe not directly, has a history of deploying one or two or several people in their voices, finding expression. Now you've outlined the governance issues around NSFAS, and I've asked you about SASCO's ability to find expression with the ANC. So I suppose one must then ask, if the issues around governance are so clear and so acute, and if SASCO is able to lobby and function with the ANC, should it not have a more effective ability to, one, if you are sending people to or deploying people to the NSFAS board, to ensure that those people are capable, and two, to be able to say to government, the Minister of Higher Education, to say, this board is not being very effective, and it's undermining students. What do you have to say to that?
You're quite correct. You are reading from a proper script. Script, at least, that is there in history. When I was still Secretary General, by the way, first time president who's been a Secretary General of SASCO. That does not need a round of applause. It's just a service in the struggle. But when I was Secretary General, we led a march which went to Department of Higher Education to call for a dissolution of the board. When we started seeing that this issue of disbursements of allowances is being hijacked, through nefarious activities, so we said, this board must be dissolved. The then minister was Dr. Plainsman. Indeed, it was dissolved. Right? We then called for removal of these fintechs that were disbursing money. That happened. I'm just talking about something which happened last year, right? That happened. And by the way, with what you've mentioned with the sort of dwindling of influence in the space of higher education, or the confidence that students would bestow in SASCO, with that, through that intervention of saying the board must be dissolved and these fintechs, students, they voted us. In these SRCs, they said, no, we can see SASCO now speaking the language, of the oppressed. So we want to, bestow confidence in them by voting them into our SRCs. So we've done that. The question of influence, sometimes people, they try to duck this question, and I will never. If you are in an organization, you are an organization because there's a certain level of injustice you want to correct. And you are doing that through power. You get me? You are doing that through, consolidating yourselves. You are mobilizing yourselves through power. You are not doing this thing because you don't want power. You're doing this because through power you can make meaningful change. If SASCO, through its influence, is able to say, by the way, I'm in the pool of students, not just SASCO members, the pool of students. We do believe that from the generation of fees must fall, so-and-so can represent us better because we speak the same language concerning this matter. Therefore, they must be there. And they properly maybe sometimes qualify and all of that. They qualify because other entities, they require that. We would never advance a position where you are less qualified to, serve a nation. We would never do that. And then, so through influence, it's necessary. We never shy away from that we do influence every space. If SASCO was to be given an opportunity to be the president, to have a president of the country, we would never shy away from that. We would want to go for it. If SASCO were to get a minister of higher education, deputy, whatever, we would go for that because our policy posture informs us that to have a meaningful change, fundamental change, we must access levers of power.
And that includes the deployment of SASCO people.
That includes the deployment of SASCO to everywhere. By the way, I must dispel this notion that there's some kind of, some potent or deployment of SASCO to the board or whatsoever. It isn't the case. It's a discretion. It's a discretion that takes place at whoever becomes the minister to say, how are students influential right now? However, let me talk about this. The NSFAS board, what you're speaking about, through its act, necessitates the representation of 3 students appointed by the minister. 3 students appointed by the minister. Do you remember? Now, students who are influential, whichever way, they would find themselves in the board of NSFAS or in any other board. However, because influence does not work directly, as you know. It's amount of weight and gravitas that you have in society that would make you to be recognizable to effect that people say that you need to be here so that we can speak about progressive change.
And the reason I'm asking you this question is, of course, it's relevant to NSFAS. You've spoken about the dissolution of the board, but we've recently had an issue where Minister Gwede Mantashe's son found his way to a board, I think, of a SETA, of an within the higher education space. You say that you are influencing. So maybe, and there was kind of a wide public backlash to say that he was not qualified. To say he was not qualified, and the Minister of Higher Education has rolled back that decision. First of all, I am correct in saying that the Minister of Higher Education currently is an ANC member.
He's an ANC member.
So that discretion that you speak about necessitates, whether it's because they're ANC people, because of a particular political and position, view, persuasion. How does SASCO then respond to? Because you're saying cadre deployment is not a bad thing, but how do you respond to the kind of deployment where perhaps the children of ministers are put on boards, but perhaps don't have the track records to back it up?
Okay, 2 things here. First of all is that appointment to SETA boards is different from appointments to NSFAS board.
How so?
In the act for NSFAS, it stipulates the necessary representation, right? That in the 13 members of the board that are to be there, appointed by the minister, there's a necessity for 3 who are nominated by national students' organizations. We are a national students' organization. But with SETAs, it's different. Your nomination is constituency-based. What do I mean, Rori? If there's a skills training, SETA, focusing on chemical engineering or whatsoever, theater, right? That's it. If you are to be nominated there must be either some chemical engineering training institute or some co-op of chemical engineers, all from that constituency of chemists. Then if you're nominated from that corner, you make it into that board. You hear? I don't think there's SASCO there. We are here with students in institutions of higher learning. Manufacturing, construction, all of that, right? You must be. I think the person you're referring to must have been in which board? I think it was a manufacturing and something. I don't think SASCO is necessarily found there, Now, it'd be far more difficult to articulate as to how a member got there, whether they do have qualifications or not, because we were not privy to that kind of an exercise to make it a point that a person is appointed or not.
But what is your view, President? What is your view about the minister and the ANC deploying, or being seen rather, to deploy people to higher education board? You're saying that SASCO doesn't have influence, but that's not the point.
The ANC deploying to higher education.
Yes, but deploying people who are clearly don't have who don't have what it takes to back it up. Because in some instances, they are saying that it is because his father is Minister Gwede Mantashe, and effectively he's the member of the ANC.
From what I heard from the buzz that is in the news, I'm not too sure the outcry about this specific person you're speaking about. The outcry was about qualifications of backing it up. Why? From a distant knowledge about the person, there's acquired qualifications like 2 masters, our other one got it in China, a lot of that. He's been involved, like I think it's an agri-essay. Now, I'm saying in the manufacturing skills training area, I wouldn't be assertive to say it doesn't have the skills to back it up. Nor do I know, because I'm looking at it from a distance. But your generic question about the ANC deploying or putting people in the Department of Higher Education, tell me, tell me which organization conducts elections, wins, and then has gone to people canvassing to the people out there in the nation who are to bring better education, who are to train young people, to equip them with skills, we are to provide jobs, and then suddenly when they get power, they don't get the people that they have been training to ensure that they go and deliver exactly on that particular mandate. Which organization would do that? I don't understand this kind of power shy element, even from a certain ANC corners. There's a certain ANC corner where people, they prove to be somewhat power shy to express the fact that we went to elections to win. And then when we win, we are backed up by this number of votes, to change the lives of people. And for us there are people we can trust. These are politics. We're not going to just take anyone from anywhere. There are people we trust who will listen to us, because we are accountable to the people. Therefore, when we account to the people, we can't say, we don't know, like that gentleman who messed up ESCOM and left, I forgot his name, that white gentleman,
Andre Director.
Now, the ANC struggled to answer, where is this chap coming from? You can't do that. I don't understand this. So, Rori, when you acquire power, you are acquiring power through being backed by the people, and that power belongs to the people. You are accountable to the people, and therefore you're not going to take from an alien. You have to take from within the people, and you need to take trusted soldiers to go and discharge the duties in order to deliver the mandate that the people voted you for. So yes, the ANC must deploy people in the department, in any department that they have power over. They should do so. Yes.
And just to clarify, the son of Minister Mantashe that is under discussion here, his name is Buyambo, correct? Mantashe. And you mentioned that he had master's degrees, but it's an important conversation to have, especially because you mentioned earlier that there's been a general decline in activism, and SASCO's trajectory and its hopes effectively should be seen in parallel to that. But when we look, I suppose maybe when I look anecdotally from a distance, it is also tied to the support that the ANC enjoys in the country. Because of course, as you say, students can see SASCO and NSFAS, all of these things, whether they operate in lockstep, it's a big bubble in the public imagination. So I suppose the question then becomes, the ANC is in, many people say, decline. You say that the ANC, yes, has acquired power. It is the majority party in the last election. And it should be able to deploy its forces effectively. Right? But many will say that it's not effective in that mission. That's the first thing. And the next one, I suppose, then the question of the future then must come up. Right? To say that it's 2025, there's an electoral conference in the ANC coming up. I won't necessarily robustly ask you which faction you fall into, but I would like your assessment before we get to the elective conference. I'd be really, really interested, because it speaks to this issue of power, this issue of deployment particularly. And now we're under the GNU. What, if any, impact rather, do you think the GNU has had on SASCO and on the higher education sector and the lives of young people and students, whether good or bad?
You know what, the quite elongated, your long-winded.
Yes, my question is I wanted to, I was trying to, but yes, I finally got to that.
I'll try, to filter in my responses to some of the assertions you brought in, but just to begin with your direct question at the end, I think the lessons that the GNU has provided for any South African is that everyone needs to be an active player in the arena of social change. Right? What do I mean by that? You find that everyone is political in South Africa. To whichever degree, we speak about the ICJ matter, South Africa taking Israel to international court. We speak about national health insurance. We speak about the Bella Act. We speak about the much controversial only to those who choose to be ignorant, by the way, but with not so much weight of controversy, the issue of the Land Expropriation Act. Yeah? You look at that, the multifaceted nature according to which the ANC has been able, to drive a policy shift in South Africa, even within, this GNU model of governance. Yeah. Now, I think everyone, because there's been just an awakening in South Africa, is politically active to whatever degree. And that lesson, right, that we all have to be players for social change. It's what now has made South Africa to be even more democratic of a country, right? So I'm saying there's that lesson that general, I think all of us have learned, but in the higher education space, equally, the same lesson provides. We're currently working on amendments to the Higher Education Act because we're looking at the monopoly and the kind of power that institutions have to themselves. That institutions of higher learning, specifically universities, are not joining the chorus of this need for social change. That is, be an institution that is accountable to the people, right? Universities are less accountable to the people. That is, if they're not accountable to government as we would like them to be, because the reflection of people's power is through government, as it is now in the model of the GNU. Right? Now, we would want certain changes, accountability when it comes to funds, once they enter the institution, regulations when it comes to funds, compositions of councils, right? Our councils in universities are predominantly, composed of people, especially in the context of influence, the direction of council decision-making by big business, correct? You have your donors there, council chairs. Most of them are business executives. And you tell me that council chair will be probably interested in the change of a life of a student who's coming from a poor background, when their child is probably in Harvard or somewhere in some university in Australia. That would not be the case. So universities are just not a reflection of what society called South Africa is becoming. More inclusive? No? There's nothing. You have a senate, a structure called a senate in a university that is chaired by a vice chancellor. If you're a political lead, a student activist or whatsoever, you have some problems, they will frustrate you through that, even in the context of academic success and all of that. So I'm saying, as much as society is becoming more politically active for social change, university is closing down and clamping down on activism. Hence, activism now is dying, and we want to resuscitate it. We want to revive it, because no nation, Rori, no nation can develop without education. And those education institutions are important, that there must be a contestation of ideas. And that social change actually will be sparked through those institutions. That's where it begins. Those who formed the ANC Youth League, the generation that later dethroned the apartheid government, right, was in institutions of higher learning. Do you think if people like Nelson Mandela or Tambo never went to institutions of higher learning, they would have had the level of consciousness to say, this system is not working for the majority that is marginalized? They would have not. Education plays an important role, but education, it must be such that there's activity on campus. You learn, not only learning through books, but through experience, because we say these institutions are a reflective image of what a society is and what it should be like. Now, in universities, we're going back, while society of South Africa is going forward. So those are the lessons that we can draw from the GNU makeup, even the lessons that we can, speak about in the context of higher education and the changes that needed to be made. That is what I can tell you.
I'm sorry for my long ramblings, because they were, of course, you're giving rich answers. But it's important that you note that you say that universities are going back, because it speaks to your earlier discussion around COVID and the impact on COVID, and when you were giving us a historical outline of activism on campus. But there's also a famous saying that universities, they say, they are microcosms of society, representations of society. So I think first I should ask you, I'd love to know, if universities are going backwards, and activism is increasing, then I suppose the question needs to become, why are those opposite currents happening? What is causing? You mentioned big business, but big business has always been there. What is causing that separation?
Okay. You would not have to isolate, like I said to you earlier on, what kind of a wake-up call it gave to management of institutions, the COVID-19. I can hardly recall any mass mobilization of students. I can hardly recall, only because, of course, I'm young. I would have only lived to experience fees must fall. But of course, there will be historical anecdotes that will teach us. But in South Africa, fees must fall was something huge that then captivated these business execs that are running these institutions to say, this call for social change by students, is going to impact our ability to make money. Right? If Rori, have you ever had any mass gathering before which was saying fees must fall? There must be no fees that are incurred by students in institutions. Where do business executives make money out of that, if you are saying that? Do you get my point? Now, if that is the case, it gave them in a way, because you're saying they've always been there. They have always been there. Let me give you another example. For the past 30 years, things have been almost the same in South Africa. right? Especially in the business industry. Exploitation, retrenchments, lack of provision for employment and all of that. We started instituting now, as the progressives, when progressives, I mean South African progressives, civil society, alliances to the ANC, general citizens of the country, they say, we need land expropriation. You saw now the level of activism of business in trying to respond or react to that. On NHI, on Bella Act, when we were calling social change is only business driven, or it's not only targeted on business only. Yeah? We may speak about social change on humanitarian issues like the issue of Palestine, which beneath it, of course, there's always going to be economics that are embedded, right? Now, all that, right, it necessitated business to react and to respond in a reactionary, anti-progressive manner, all right? So it's not new, this phenomenon that things would have been the case for many years, but suddenly there's some shift, all right? As if to qualify the argument that, currently we are experiencing this clampdown on activism, right? As a result of how the institution is made up in the context of governance and management, right? So we are experiencing that because they got a wake-up call in the context of the power that students have. Yeah. Did we effectively utilize the moment? I don't think so, right? We did not effectively utilize the moment, Rori. The fees must fall. At least you were part of that generation. You remember very well, the minute that government, considered to say, we are going to subsidize the increment, right? All students said, we're going back to class. There was never, a commitment, even in 2015 and 2016, to say, okay, fine, fees must fall. They are permanently falling. Therefore, we are ushering a new age for free education in South Africa. The minute the fees, that increment, President Jacob Zuma said, no, it's fine, we're going to subsidize. Therefore, it would mean then we did not effectively utilize the moment, right? Because apart from the fact that education ought to be free in the monetary sense, that is, non-commodity must not be sold, right? It also must be free in the context of curriculum, what we are taught, right? Yeah, there's students formation that targets pupils, that is learners, called COSAS, is also in alliance with us. Yeah? Around the same time, as a result of the fees must fall phenomenon, they started saying, actually, we need history to be taught as a compulsory subject to everyone in primary education. History that will enable anyone in South Africa to learn about their past, to learn about the evolution of the South African community up to the point it is right now. What the sort of struggles that people had to go through and all of that. I normally hear, just on a pattern shot on this one, I normally hear how these people, the African diaspora, like people like Elon Musk, they try to similarize, this issue of what they term to be white genocide versus what happened in apartheid. They said, Nelson Mandela would have not liked it to be, Nelson Mandela didn't fight for it, we would have not liked it. That me as Elon Musk, I can't get business because I'm white. This person is crying from at the top of the ivory tower. He's complaining, right? While they're toiling myself. Now, you can't similarize the two. It isn't. Yes, we are in a diverse nation whose prosperity is centered around social cohesion, that we must be united and all of that. But you would not be striking social cohesion if there's imbalances that are not addressed. And for you to be able to address those imbalances, you need to affect certain policies, so you bridge the gap. Back to your question, institutions of higher learning, it's a reality. They are, regressing. They are going backwards in the context of openness to political ideas, because political ideas are founded based on how we philosophize the construction of a society, right? How we think and imagine, the kind of imagination is this generation to see the current, facets of the current society, and how would we change, alter that, and If there are reforms that are needed, to be in place, or if there's necessity for an uprooting of the entire system, because making certain alterations won't work altogether, it's through political consciousness that we can be able to shift society from one stage of development to the next. If now you are in university, where, by the way, this political consciousness can be enriched, because you are in a space of exchange of ideas, and you are suddenly clamping down on all of that. You put regressive, non-democratic, lack of participatory policies and regulations in university. It means you are effectively killing the nation. The future of the nation resides in you making it a point that these institutions are open to a challenge and contest of ideas.
As we move to a close, the reason I'm fascinated to have heard your take a little bit on the GNU and the impact, because you mentioned big business, you mentioned the regressive and the clamping down of space within, whether for new ideas, and that kind of reawakening and fire around political activism. Many may describe what you're talking about as liberal policies. Neoliberalism, from what I recall, unless it's changed, SASCO described itself as a Marxist-Leninist organization, similar actually to the EFF, even describes himself as that. Right now, we are now headed to the future.
So that I get you, Rori.
Sure.
Which one is liberal? What I'm saying,
the state of hijacking, neoliberalism.
State of
is
affairs.
neoliberalism.
Fine. It's neoliberal. I agree with you.
And thanks for helping me clarify that.
Yes.
But as you said, we are having this mass political awakening of activism.
Of the general society. Yes.
We're having institutions that are regressive and effectively capital, right? We, as you've now rightly mentioned, let's go there, with people like Elon Musk, Starlink, right now, we are seeing the differences within the GNU. Perhaps the ANC has one policy, but the DA, for instance, has a very particular reading of Black economic empowerment.
Exactly.
So the power and the balance of forces in society, I think that they are changing. I think you'd agree with that statement.
I would agree with that.
As they are changing, what is the role of young people? Where are young people? Where are young people in the ANC elective conference? And where are young people in parliament right now?
Interesting. Look, Rori, let me tell you this thing. It might sound a bit unpopular for me to say this, but I have to say it. The mark of progression, that is how we move from one stage to the next in the positive picture, is through what capacity does a nation have, to travel that journey. And that capacity will also reside in its drivers, and its drivers is going to be the people who are capacitated to shift society to the positive direction. I don't particularly hold on to this notion that perfect ideas are always reside in young people. I don't, right? I just think that young people have the aptitude, the time, the energy to acquire the necessary knowledge to shift society. Because sometimes we make this mistake of saying, where are young people? And then any Tom, Dick, and Harry is just taken and placed in a strategic position, and they fail. And they fail now what would have been a revolutionary project to uplift young people to be the drivers for change, right? Now, I don't particularly hold on to that. I'm not part of that monolithic church that for any change to happen, necessarily it must be young people at the center of it. However, I would say this. It is necessary for young people to equip themselves. You don't become part of the group and suddenly, through social proof, you will acquire the same status certain people have in that particular group, right? There are people in the group who are going to equip themselves. No? They equip themselves, they learn, they understand everything, they read, they do all of that, right? And the unfortunate situation is that this church-like movement of young people swelling in ranks and all of that, it isn't coupled with the level of hype on the necessity to capacitate also these young people. Those are the problems I have, because we push for young people, they're in parliament, suddenly they are quiet. There's a significant number of young people in parliament, right? They don't have to be, speak when it's not even necessary. I'm not that kind of a person. They don't need to charge for populism. I'm not that kind of a person as well. You're right? Popularity sometimes is a problem if what you strive popularity for isn't rooted in exactly what the people want. If popularity for you, Rori, you might come across challenges. Because popularity should be the popularity of the project of the people. Right? Now, young people, they are in strategic positions. Is that enough? No. I'm more for the strategic young people in strategic positions to drive the agenda for transformation. I don't think anything will transform if you just put a young person just for the sake of putting a young person. Nothing is going to transform that. That's unscientific, right? Now, elective conference of the ANC, unfortunately, Rori, we might be in alliance, but unlike the African National Congress Youth League, we do not get a percentage participation in the elective component of the conference of the ANC. We only participate to policy discussions. So whether I would think where young people would be or who must be elected, it's null, because it's not going to find expression in a conference of an ANC.
I don't know if that's true. I mean, firstly, thank you for that response, President. So, am I correct in to say that you then differ with the general consensus of view, the long-term view of the ANC Youth League, when they say they want young people to swell in the ranks within the ANC and within government? So it's not an ANC issue, it's within government and advocating for the representation. You, President, you object to that plain view.
I seek for certain amendments to that view.
Which are?
That, as I stated to you, yes, Youth League, yes to any young person. I agree. Let's get young people. Because I said, they've got the energy that old people no longer have. They've got the aptitude to learn more that the senior citizens no longer have, right? They do have that aptitude. There's one area which is missing. The quality aspect, the capacity aspect. Let's work on that, Youth League, right? Let's not have a mass, image about the swelling of ranks, right? Let's not have that, because not unless we can be promised that, these young people, if you speak about the general membership you have or SASCO has, you speak about that general membership and you say, here are young people, we can ascertain that anyone you take from them, right, is going to make the country proud. If you can assert that, that's what I want, right? Young people must be there, but the real thing here is about meaningful change, not whether which section of society is there or not in the levers of power. But the real battle here is that change must be effected in society. No? So young people must be there. The only thing inherently that they already have inherently is the aptitude and the energy. That energy that they have in them is what gives them now an advantage for an argument to be prioritized to govern a country. Capacity must be in the picture, though, right? That's what I would put. It's a conversation that I openly have with my comrades in Youth League. Yes,
I think that is it's a view that's different, I must say. I haven't heard lots of it. Capacity.
I should mention though so that I'm not particularly captured incorrectly. The question of capacity I speak about isn't experience necessarily, all right? Because sometimes you misconstrue this to say, or others would interpret it to say, but what capacity are you speaking about? Maybe to, let's say, to run ESCOM. We need a young person to run ESCOM. I agree to that, right? A person says, but KAMTSHE was speaking about capacity, right? Capacity development would have required this person to have acquired a certain level of experience. And no. I'm not talking about you gaining experience there. All right? Capacity, you can tell capacity, Comrade Rori. Now, an organization to have systems to check on capacity. Before you take people for deployment to wherever, you need to check on their level of capacity through systems. Other organizations, they use interviews and whatsoever, but more so for you, you need to check on the track record. As a revolutionary organization, you need to check on the track record, on the participation level of this person. How strategic has it been in the movement? Then you can say, definitely this person is capacitated. Because the capacity is with the knowledge that they have, that in all meetings this person has been saying, this is how I can shape this particular, and this is how all this organization ought to shape, or these are the ideas that this organization need to carry to shape this space, this entity, and whatsoever, right? So it shouldn't be taken out of context to say for young people, they need to get some experience. The capacity isn't only located, get the qualification isn't only located in experience, right? But you can't just take someone, or you can tell that, no, this gent or this lady will not take us far. You can tell because you've tracked internal. People who conduct these deployment committee meetings, who conduct interviews sometimes, are at a national level or provincial levels. No? They would know because they vet internal in an organization. Oh, where are you from? How far have you been active? At what level of activism? What energy have you disposed? What are your ideas? Are your ideas anyway, inclined with the ideas that we have as a movement? And all of that. I'm just trying to, use a simple language because this is much more of a friendly platform. If I would have been in a conference, I would have been more, I would have heightened in my kind of language for it. But because we're here, and the nation is to understand what we stand for. That is what I stand for. Capacitated young leadership must be in positions of power.
I think it's been a very rich and interesting discussion. I got a couple of more things to ask you, but I do think that we must draw to a close on that issue of capacitation and capacity. SASCO, but in Amandla, you spoke about a student charter. You spoke about some of your views in the work that you're doing. But as we draw to a close, what is your message to young people in the country to understand you, the work of SASCO, and where we are going?
I would say, Rori, that young people need to embrace education, but not just education. The young people need to embrace the kind of education that will foster a meaningful change, that is transformation, fundamental change, in South Africa. Young people must be educated and must, be entrusted to be educated beyond the confines of their own academic, learning. They must understand, why is it necessary to have the Land Expropriation Act? Why is it necessary to have an NHI? How important it is to have a BELA. Why it's so much important to amend the Higher Education Act. Why is it important for South Africa to sustain its sovereignty, even in the face of imperialist onslaught by the United States? Why is it South Africa had to fight for the Palestinians and taking Israel to ICJ? For young people must understand all of these things which contribute, right? Which contribute to a society that is developing for a better. We can't embrace education only to take ourselves steps backwards. We want to go forward. Young people must be educated and must embrace education to understand the industrial world of today. You know, we are in a world of artificial intelligence. What threats does it pose for Starlink, you know, to be in South Africa? Yeah? If Starlink has got access to certain security systems in South Africa, what intelligence threat does it pose for this country? All of those things. So young people must be interested in education, not limited to the confines of their own academic pursuit, but must go beyond to be well-rounded, to be a truly conscious nation. We need young people to really embrace education in that sense.
And hopefully, the people in SASCO and yourself, because I knew I said those are the closing words, but I'm struck by the word capacitation, and I'm struck by the list of things that you say society needs to be, young people need to be aware of, whether it's ICJ, NHI, what's this, expropriation, all of those issues that are seizing society. The reason I bring up young people is because I'm thinking to my head, I'm thinking young people, I'm thinking Sihle Lonze. If I think about, the higher education, when I think about the issues and the matters of parliament, and I think budget, I think Sinawo Tambo, I think Naledi Chirwa, I think Karabo Kakao, for instance, in higher education. I'm struggling to think of SASCO and ANC young people. Nompendulum Kacha used to be the portfolio chairperson of the higher education committee. She's no longer in parliament. So I suppose that my actual last question, I want to ascertain, I want to understand, how is SASCO ensuring, at least within your framework of capacitation, how are young people landing up, at least in the rooms, to be able to effect and achieve the things that you've outlined?
Definitely, Rori, you're speaking to a president who's been a president when 5 months, because I was elected SASCO president in December 2024. I've outlined sufficiently what is our program. I think I've sold it enough that you can see that this can build capacity in young people.
Exactly.
I think you can see that. Let's have this chat, let's just somewhere towards the close of SASCO this term. Let's have this chat and we look back. So, KAMTSHE, you were here and you promised capacitation. Do I promise capacitation because do I think I can take a donkey to a river and if it does not drink, I force it to drink? No, I can't. But there are willing young minds out there to learn, right? Which is why we've postured ourselves to the extent that we say, we need to be smart and rigorous in our approach. Let's look at it. What is it that divides us in institutions of higher learning? Because the Students' Charter is more about a strategy for a fundamental change. Now, in the EFF, in whatever formation that is on campus, DASO, what brilliant minds are there? Let's have a chat. Don't you think that curriculum needs to be changed to look like this? Don't you think that? So when we have certain areas of convergences, you can tell now that I'm dealing with a bright mind. I'm dealing with a capacitated mind. Therefore, the future of the nation should be reflective of that. So I'm saying to you, does SASCO get to build capacity or not? It's a measure. And that we can test in the next 2 or 3 years, because I'm saying, it would be unfair, my brother. I've just,
You've just arrived.
I've just arrived.
President, thank you so much for your time
Thank you very much,
and
Rori.
expanding on some of your thoughts. And I will hold you to that, by the way. It's a midterm review. I want to know the direction of not just of the organization, but where are young people?
And the interesting part is that you will not only be the person who will be making that measurement. Society will as well.
And we
That's the
will
interesting part.
look at the SRC elections of that year.
Yeah.
Nakarata the election. Let's count the numbers.
Can you tell me?
Yes.
Would a win or loss of elections judge the capacity of young people?
I think let's have that conversation when we have the numbers in front of us. Thank you very much, President.
Yeah, I'll just say there are many factors which contribute to a victory or a loss, but part in the main, leaders also play a role. I agree with you.
Exactly.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for joining us this episode. It's been a very enriching and interesting experience trying to understand the role of young people in general, but young people in higher education in particular. Remember, as Wu said at the beginning, that Moseli's Kitchen is available in Johannesburg, particularly opening a new Rosebank store. We are available. Moseli's Kitchen is on Uber Eats, on Spaza Eats, as well as Mr. D. There are specials on there all the time. So please do go and check that out, because I'm sure you'll be able to find something to eat and to capacitate your stomach as we go on. But thank you very much.
And let's call on students to also order on those Uber Eats.
Exactly. And I'm sure the president will ensure that the NSFAS allowances are in your bank account, that you can buy your fix of Moseli's Kitchen. President, thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you.